seek, above all, for a game worth playing. Oh baby, it's witchcraft contagious. I felt it for ages. We're out of these cages in this house of mages. It's witchcraft, it's dangerous. Beware of these pages. There's spells of all flavors in this house of mages. In this house of mages. In this house of mages.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Make Yoga Magick Again, the House of Mages podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Erulian Cuming. I am a mischievous mage, a lover of wisdom, a seeker of mysteries, and a ritual embodiment Tantra yoga teacher trainer, amongst a myriad of many other weird and wonderful things. In this episode, I chat with erotic alchemist Silja Janina. Silja is a coach, healer, and mentor for female sexuality, embodiment, and empowerment. In her work, she combines wisdom from Taoism, Tantra, mixed with modern knowledge about how to thrive as a woman, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and sexually. I first heard about Silja just a few months ago when I was chatting with a friend of mine about some possible future podcast guests. She recommended Silja and directed me to her Instagram, and I'm so glad she did. I immediately resonated with Silja's practical and insightful approach to connecting with our innate erotic nature, and after listening to a podcast she was featured on, I knew I had to connect with her to chat more on here. There ended up being so much to discuss, and we'll be doing a part 2 sometime in the future. For now, without further ado, here's my chat with Silja Janina. All right, and we are live. So welcome everybody to this episode of Make Yoga Magick Again, the House of Mages podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Erulian Cuming, and on this episode, I have Silja Janina, who we'll get into in a little bit about what she does. She can explain it a little bit better than I can. But I heard of Silja through a friend of mine a few months ago, and my friend, she told me, I can't remember exactly what she said or why, but I found your page on Instagram and I listened to a podcast that you were featured in, and I really liked the way that I feel like a lot of people in, I guess, like the spiritual industry as a whole, but even in the sexuality industry, people tend to just say vague umbrella terms, but don't really get into specific practical details. But you were just like dropping gem after gem of little practical details just in the podcast. And I know you mainly work with women, but a lot of it I really resonated with. And a lot of it even just like helped me to go away and explore more of myself and then come back with more questions. And hence why we're here today, as a lot of my podcasts end up being that I just want to chat to you and just pick your brain about a few ideas, and why not do that in the public space so the others can hear your golden gems as well. So yeah, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I'm really looking forward to our talk.
Yeah, finally. So we've been trying to chase each other for the last few months, bouncing back and forth, but I'm sure, like everything, it's worked out at a perfect time. So I thought we might just start with, because we were talking a little bit before the podcast, how, you know, the industry that you're in can be called different things, such as like sacred sexuality or neo-tantra, or and how ironic it is that we need to call it sacred sexuality because it, you know, should be sacred sexuality, just sexuality. But yeah, so yeah, if you wanted to kind of explain what you would label, if you can label what you do, or and yeah, a little bit more about how you got into it and why you do what you do.
Yeah. How I would label it, I do use the words tantra or neo-tantra or sacred sexuality because I feel people then get an understanding of what I do. But as you just said as well, I think it's just normal sexuality. So I would say I help women mostly, but also men, find back to their authentic sexuality and healthy sexuality, and heal their sexuality. Because we live in a world where most people probably get their education from porn or from school. And I don't know about you, but my sex education in school was very, very limited. So I did not really learn, okay, this is a vagina and this is a penis and nothing much more. So I think there's like so much lack of education. And I would say I just educate people about sexuality and help them find their authentic sexuality, because each person has a different kind of sexuality, a different sexual expression. And it's really important to find that. So I help people find their sexual truth, I would say, which can, look very different for different people. And I do like the term sacred sexuality. And I mean, most people think of Tantra also as something like sacred, or they get an understanding or a feeling of what sexuality is. And I think I do like the term because people then get an understanding that sex can be sacred. Because there's still, I mean, I live or work in a bubble where people are interested in sexuality, right? So the people come to me and they're interested, but I know that the broad mass of people, they don't necessarily see sex as something sacred. There's still so much shame, so much judgment, so much, also trauma in that field. But what is important for me is that others understand that everything about sexuality is sacred. So if people have certain kinks, or if they have a certain sexual expression that might be different than the norm, that it still can be sacred. And how I got into this is through my own story. I've been on like a healing journey for 10 years. I was 21 and I moved away from home, and suddenly overnight my skin broke out. So I got acne, anxiety, like my hormones were so out of control. And I kind of looked for solutions, or for what this was about, or like the reasons, the reasons why everything about me was just like, it felt out of control. And I went on a really, really long healing journey, and I started with yoga and with meditation, with nutrition. I tried like every nutrition on this planet, from paleo to vegan to keto. And I never, like, it did help me to get more connected with myself, and it did help me heal in some way, but there was always something missing. And then I did find that missing link in my sexuality. That was like the last place I would look into, because I thought, well, my sexuality looks normal, or, I didn't know what was a normal sexuality. So I kind of normalized my sexuality, which was not healthy, but I thought it was like, that's just how sex is. And through healing my sexuality, I went onto this path because I thought, wow, this is crazy. Like, I thought this is how sex is, but it's so different from everything I got taught. And I wanted to like spread this message, because I know many people don't even scratch the surface of what sexuality is.
Yeah, definitely. And you made a few really good points, because that's the thing. It has been kind of swept under the carpet as like this shameful thing that we don't talk about. And still to this day, a lot of people, you can tell like their whole body tightening and contracting when this topic comes up. And it's just not acceptable in society generally to talk about it. And because of that, amongst all the other things, but we don't have the ability to ask and find out what's normalized. And so you just basically have to go with whatever your experience is, and then often not finding out and anything to compare it to. So I'd like to ask if you're open to sharing. So once you started to shift your perspective on pleasure and on your own sexuality, how did that start to change your interaction with your relationships? Because did you still, were you in an existing relationship when that happened? When you started to have more lovers, like, did you was it then another whole step to start to communicate with that, and was like a whole developing a new language around it? Yeah, I'd love to hear about because I guess that would be the next step then, trying to communicate it, because a lot of people might not even realize.
Yeah. I would say that, like, I did start my sexual healing journey on my own after a relationship, because I had a relationship and later I found out that he was a narcissist. And in the relationship, I realized that my body kind of shut down more and more. And it was like the peak of all the symptoms my body expressed also in sexuality. And for the first time, I understood how deeply connected the relationship I have with a person, and the trust or the distrust I have with a person is reflected in my sexuality. And after that, I spent some months on my own, just really going deep into my own healing. And I didn't even want to be sexual with someone, because I kind of realized how many times I also let others cross my boundaries, for example, which is something that's so common. I think I've never met a woman who only had sex when she really, really felt like it. So I think that's a big, big topic. And that was also a big topic for me. And I experienced sexual trauma as a child. And that was something that I then found out. And there was a lot of deep healing work that I had to do. And after that, my relationship to myself and to my body and my sexuality obviously changed completely. So I did attract other people, and it did reflect in how I related to that person, not just sexually, but in general, like, that I have my boundaries, for example. I think that's something super important. And especially with trauma, I had to learn what are my boundaries and how can I communicate my boundaries. So it definitely showed in my relationships. And I think the one after that healing journey, the relationship I had, that was one where for the first time I still had to learn, right? So there were still moments where I thought, oh, now I did have sex, maybe even though I didn't feel like it, and I had to learn to really listen to my body. So that was kind of the learning phase. Now after that relationship, the relationship I am in right now, it's like all the work that I had to do now is like, how do you say that in English? Like, you can reap the fruits, or like, reap
the rewards, or pick the fruit.
Yeah. But I also do think that it's still always a learning journey. So it's not that my relationship and my sexuality is perfect. There are always moments when I go deeper, when there are challenges coming up. So, but definitely shows in the relationships as well.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, because I'm really interested, because I feel like there's, two parts to it that are both have a kind of development and learning around their own, in that you're developing your own connection to yourself and finding out what you like by yourself, with yourself. And then it's when you are ready to, share that with other people, to develop that as well. And I feel like that's any kind of learning. I remember when I was getting into certain practices, and I thought I knew it very well. Well, I felt I knew it very well in my body. But then when I tried to express that to other people and explain it, I kind of tripped over my words, because I've never had to actually explain it. So that was a whole nother journey, trying to then learn how to articulate it. Because you mentioned in the other podcast that I first heard you on, that, a lot of men don't know how to listen to body language and things like that as well. And so I'm really interested if you'd be able to share how women can, once they do learn, we'll go into that soon, because I really want to chat to you about that as well. But before that, since we're on the topic of relationships, how can they start to share that? And what can they do if they don't necessarily get good feedback? Because I've actually had friends before who've mentioned it to a partner, and then the partner's got very offended and taken it personally and kind of withdrawn, and then they haven't mentioned it again, and then nothing ever changes, and then obviously it doesn't really work out. So, big question. But I was wondering if you could touch on that a little bit, for any women wanting to, start to express that with their partners, or even just new lovers.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And I think there's no way around communicating openly And even if one person is offended, like I can't withhold my truth and that my bond is crossed if someone else is offended, right? So it is a very, like, obviously intimate and very sensitive topic. And I think especially men have this this feeling of they need to perform or they need to be a good lover. And when there's any kind of like rejection, for example, a person can see it as rejection. If I don't want to have sex with you right now, then the partner can see it as a rejection. And there's a lot of, you have to like frame it very sensitively to not hurt someone. And I think what would help is like starting the topic in a very general way, because if people or if men or anybody understands how our bodies work and that it's nothing having to do personal with them, but it's like just something how our sexuality works. So for example, that a woman's body usually takes a bit longer to like open up to be like really ready for penetration. And if you always watch porn and women are ready in like 30 seconds, then obviously you think that you're doing something wrong, and like opening this conversation of, look, this is how it actually is. And educating, like that both partners educate themselves about sex and that it's normal, that it doesn't have to do, that it's not that you're not a good lover because she's not ready in 1 minute, but that's just how the female body usually works. And also that, for example, when a woman is entered too early, that this can lead to her body shutting down or like becoming numb. And understanding this, I think a lover that really cares about someone else should be able to, even if, it's okay if there's hurt or there's shame or there's anger in the first moment, but I think it's their responsibility to like listen. Someone is really not at all able to listen, only takes things personal, and there's no communication possible, then I would say it might be the wrong lover. Like if someone cares about you, at some point they should be able to like put their ego aside and listen to like, what do you need? And I think it's important to be sensitive with this topic.
That's great. What, were you going to say something else?
But just also be knowing the boundaries, like if you are, because there are people who are not open to learn and they will get offended and they will not care about the other person. But if that happens, then that I wouldn't want that person as a lover, right? And I hope others would also like know their boundaries in that way.
And I want to talk about that a little bit more because it touched on something that I kind of got from your the other podcast that you did, that you seem to have a non-dualistic approach to things, in that like everything is more of a sliding spectrum, and could you just tell just by the way you kind of explain things, it wasn't black and white. And I think a lot of people who may not have had a lot of different lovers, right? They think they're either good at it or bad at it, right? But the thing is, they might have perfected like a certain style, but then if a new partner doesn't like that style, like they might get like masterful in cooking one particular meal, right? Imagine if someone's like cooking some like beautiful roast beef or something like that, and then they take you out on a date and serve that up for you, and you're like, well, thank you, I really appreciate that, but I'm actually vegan, so I'm not going to eat that, but thank you, so I'll eat the veggies, but like maybe I can give you some ideas to use some eggplant, or you can actually use this. And you're right though, and it's tricky because it does take a lot of, I'm just trying to think of like a gentle way to explain it to people, because, people do take things personally, but I think the key that I'm trying to get to, and maybe you can expand on this, on how you kind of work around this, is that not saying it's like they're not doing something wrong. They're just maybe they need to expand their knowledge and understand that everybody's different in different ways. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I always say that like the best lovers are people that are open to learn, because as you said, you can be with 100 women or 100 men, but the next one you meet might like something different. So yes, there are some techniques that most people enjoy, or some principles, how our bodies work and how pleasure works. But in general, our bodies are so different, our needs are different, our desires are different. And like you said, just because one thing worked for all others and it doesn't work with that person, doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It just means, you can get to know that person. I think you can do this in a very playful and sexy way, like, making it a game, or like not seeing it as too serious as, oh, okay, I'm doing something wrong, but like, yeah, making it fun and laughing and making it sexy and talking about what you like, what you don't like, or showing your partner. So yeah, I think you can, frame it in a nice way that it doesn't feel like, oh, I'm doing something wrong and I need to learn something, but like that it's fun learning, and fun exploring a different body as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I actually love that you said that you can make it fun, because I've noticed that as well. Like, a bit of laughter and playfulness makes it so much better. And, if I think of all my, like, really my most intimate relationships, sexual relationships, we've always had so much fun and laughter and like acted like little kids and been ridiculous, and it's like the complete opposite of what you would consider sexy a lot of the time. You know what I mean? When people think of sexy, they think of like this, kind of like smoldering, perfect, like, super serious thing, which is an aspect of it. Like, I agree. But is that your experience as well in like deep relationships? Like, you just have this complete release of all these societal ideas of what is like sexy, but then that's what leads to like really passionate sex. So it's funny, don't you think, that everyone seems to take sex so seriously, yet the most passionate sex you can have is with someone that you feel completely silly and ridiculous with.
Yeah, totally. I think like when we feel safe with someone on different levels, then that is the best sex you can have with someone, because safety is like the most important ingredient, I would say, for good sex. Because without safety, you can have the best techniques, but yeah, you won't have the ecstatic, passionate sex. While when you're playful and, like you say, you don't take things too serious, especially sex, when you can laugh about things, and maybe sometimes things go wrong or something happens that makes you laugh, and having this playfulness and this safety with the other person. Yeah, I definitely think that that's really important, and I think that's why I also think it's so important to talk so much about sex, so that it doesn't get something that's shameful, but that it's normal, and you can even, I don't know, talk about your sex accidents and laugh about it, instead of, taking the topic too serious. So yeah.
And coming back to something you mentioned earlier about school sexual education and stuff like that, I always think of that scene from Mean Girls when I think of sexual education. Have you seen Mean Girls?
I haven't, no. I rarely watch movies with serious.
Okay, yeah. No, like Mean Girls is a pretty funny movie. I highly recommend it. But yeah, so, and I always think of it as they split the men and the women up as well. And so I think, and I see that sometimes in circles, like we have these women's circles, these men's circles, and the men share their experience with men, but which I think is super nourishing and needed, definitely. But I don't personally see a lot of mixed circles that talk about the same things. And I think that's the issue as well, that we don't have these dialogues, like even just yourself and I just having this dialogue coming from your male body perspective. A lot of this is transferable. It's just relating, right? Because even though in the other podcasts you did and some of the things you posted, even though it was geared towards women, even you talking about your cycles, right? Because because my ex-partner was quite into cycle mapping, and she's educated me and helped me to understand her cycles a lot more so I can support her. And so I've also been looking into it a bit more deeply from like a research point of view. But I loved what you put up recently about, because I feel like people get very dogmatic about it. It's like, oh, cool, like, in the follicular phase, you're going to feel like this, and, in the luteal phase, you're going to feel like this. And, when you're menstruating, you have to rest. And you're like, no, like maybe when I'm menstruating, I want to go out and like do all my creative stuff and I want to be extroverted. So, and I resonated that because I've been trying to figure out my own internal cycles. And as a male, I don't have like a lunar map, so to speak. But when you said that, it kind of like helped me to be like, no, like I've got other tools to kind of map it. So to circle back, I guess my question to you for that, or to ask your perspective on, how can we start to have a better dialogue between just humans, but especially, I guess, men and women around, how to support each other in these certain things, and how to have more like laughter and have more, because we're all just trying to figure it out, right? Like there's no right or wrong answer. We're all just stumbling around trying to figure it out together.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I do think, again, through like communicating and through like sharing spaces or like opening spaces where you can, share and exchange, because for both ways, it's really important to learn about the other person, right? Like, even if you're lesbian or bisexual or whatever, it's just really important to learn about the other gender or other genders. And to, in general, like understand other people and try to understand them. And you are very right that there are not many spaces like that. And I also primarily focus on women and like the spaces I have, because first, I think it's important to like open up, and then at a certain level you can, talk with a man, for example, about your sexuality. But first, I think both men and women would probably feel most comfortable talking about things like that, about intimate things, sexuality, relationships with people from the same gender. And then I think the next step would be like to open conversations. And I was actually thinking exactly that before this podcast, that I think you're the first man that invited me, or maybe the second, but mostly I get invited by women, and then it's like two women speaking about this topic. And I was really happy today because I thought it's so important to also talk with men and like, to open this conversation, this dialogue between men and women. Even though I focus on female sexuality just because I'm a female. So I think it's really important for men as well to like learn about female sexuality, but also learn about their own sexuality, and for women as well to learn about male sexuality. So I think we definitely need more of these spaces and dialogues.
I completely agree. And like chatting to you today was kind of twofold. Like, one, I just had questions, which I'll get to soon, which is expanding upon some of the stuff you talked about in the other podcast, which I'll also link here, which was really good. But also that, I noticed that because I grew up with women, I grew up with a single mum and just a sister as my only sibling. I've, just been really lucky to have amazing women in my life, both as lovers and as platonic friends. And I've, multiple times I've been chatting to my female friends and they would share something about their relationship completely openly and honestly. And I was like, you should be telling him that, like, you know what I mean? But she's like, I can't tell him, he won't understand. And like, and this is completely fine. I completely understand. But, to me, that's a bit of an issue that, and it is a fine thing. Like, humans are strange creatures, it's not just about sharing. Like, I'm all about sharing and open communication, but it's also trying to do that in a way that the people can receive it. And so it's like, trying to do both sides, because you can liberate. I mean, maybe you can just liberate them and they can find like a more suitable match. But I'm also, I feel like everyone's trying their best, right? I don't think any men want to be offended or anything, but maybe they're just... maybe they grow up watching porn and think that they failed at something and it just doesn't compute. So do you work with couples as well? Have you done work with couples or any of that sort of capacity? And I'm interested in, and even if you're open to sharing about your current relationship, if you how you possibly use examples in that to share, because I think people would be interested in how they can maybe even just get you don't have to give away your best stuff on the podcast, but maybe a few little tools or exercises that you could recommend.
Like specifically for couples, you mean? Like, for example, what me and my partner would do? Or
for example, because I want to get into the more solo stuff soon, but just while we're on the topic of relationships, if there's a man listening to this or a woman listening to this or two women or anyone really, any gender, who just wants to start to open up more dialogue with their long-term partner or new partners, what would you recommend them do? Anything in particular?
So because as I haven't worked with one couple like that, I'm coaching one couple, for example. I have just worked with like either the man or the women in couples. And it's interesting that you're asking if I work with couples, because I do feel like it's my next step. So right now I focus mostly, like I said, on female sexual, but also there's every now and then there's a man coming that I that I coach. But I would say that obviously, because I'm a woman, the way I can help a man will always be limited because I'm not in a male body, and I think it's always best to like, it's most embodied if you're talking from your own experience. But because I have a partner, I think it could be our next step that we together like teach couples. Also because I think, it's easier to relate if there's another couple, as if I'm just one person and I'm a woman. So if there's a couple where there's a heterosexual couple where there's a man and a woman, then the man might, need a male role model or like a male coach. So I think that would be something for the future. And what my partner and I do, that's so interesting because right before, or when we met, it felt like I had a lot of, let's say, dysfunctional or / toxic relationships before. And with him, I felt like right before I met him, I felt that my cycle with men, like maybe my karmic cycle of like again and again attracting dysfunctional relationships, has stopped. And when I entered the relationship with him, it was so easy and flowing and healthy. And obviously sometimes we have a little maybe argument, but it's really hard to say because it's not that we do specific things. And I even said to him recently that I have to we naturally do things right, apparently. So the way we communicate, the way we relate to each other, the way we live, the way we, talk, do things, everything seems to just flow. And I have to kind of understand from a more analytical place, what are we actually doing? What is leading to, what is the things we're doing that we just naturally do? So I can't even give a great answer to that question.
That's okay. We can do a part 2. We're talking about possibly doing a part 2.
Yes.
So maybe you guys can go chat in a month or 2. We'll come back and.
But I do think the most important thing that we naturally do is that we respect each other deeply and we allow each other to be, and we take responsibility for ourselves, for our own emotions, our thoughts. So we don't really have many triggers, but obviously there are sometimes the trigger moments taking the responsibility, not blaming, and being respectful. I think those are they're not fancy practices, but I think they're really cool practices that help with a healthy relationship. Because just yesterday we were walking outside and there was a couple screaming on the street. And it was really interesting to see we were even thinking, okay, should we call the police? They were so disrespectful, aggressive, calling themselves names. And I felt wow, that's definitely not helping love to communicate like that. And I think open communication and letting the other person be how they want to be, not having this. We both said that we have always met people before that kind of wanted us to be in a certain way, or kind of wanted to, to have this box that we fit in, and we let ourselves change and be. Some days I'm like this, some days I'm like this, and it just allows me to be whatever I want to be, and the other way around as well. I think this deep acceptance of each other, and not wanting, you have to do this because otherwise I feel like this. I think that's really, that's something we do, and I think that's really important. I
really like that, and I think a similar approach that we even talked about before. How we're talking about if perhaps someone was doing something in a sexual situation that wasn't ideal, they're not meaning to do anything wrong. And then also they're not doing anything wrong. It's just not a desired thing. I mean, that couple who yells at each other, they might like it on some level. Who knows? You know what I mean? So, I think it's trying to, again, bring us back to that childlike state. I don't know if you've seen that. There's a famous sculpture from Burning Man, which it's two people sitting and facing away, and inside it's those two babies, two little child holding hands, they're reaching for each other. And I think that's just I always think of that when I'm in an argument with anyone, and it's trying to, but in that moment, my nervous system's taken over. Like my logical mind's like, no, this is silly. Like I love this person. I don't want to do this. But there's like an egoic part of me that is like, no, but I'm not going to be the one to break it. But I read this woman talk about little things to break it, like non-verbally. And she said she was quite short. And so whenever she wanted a proper hug from her partner, she would go on the first step of the stairway, and she'd just like stand there, and he would know that she wants a hug. And so even if she was in a bad mood, like she couldn't vocalize saying like to break the tension, but she could like get herself to like stomp and march over to the step and just stand there and look at him, and they both start laughing. And it just break the tension. So yeah, I don't know if you have something like that, or if you have an experience and that sort of thing. Just trying to wonder if you have any little techniques like that.
No, I was just thinking to the question before. I just remembered something that we do often, and that's like maybe something I would always teach others, and that is eye gazing. We did that right from the start, and there was one moment where we both won't forget that moment. We were eye gazing maybe for 20-30 minutes, and it wasn't even that we said we are going to do eye gazing now. It just happened, and then we were just in the eye gazing mode, and we just didn't stop. And I literally saw the God or the universe or whatever you want to call it, like looking through his eyes into me, and he saw the same. And I think eye gazing, I also do that in my retreats. And like after 2 or 3 minutes, when the women do eye gazing, they start crying. And I've also had this experience with strangers in like workshops where I would judge. I had a very special moment with a person. I would judge that person, or not judge, but I felt like, yeah, I don't really feel attracted to her energy. And then I did eye gazing. And after 3 minutes, I just saw, wow, she's just like me, like all these differences melted away. And I think eye gazing, it's also a very, very honest mirror. That's why it can be so difficult. But if you do eye gazing, even if there are things between you and that person, and if you do eye gazing, yes, you will feel those things, and then they can slowly melt away, and you'll go through different phases of maybe some emotions coming up. And I think eye gazing, if you do it long enough, you will pretty much always come back to a place of understanding, seeing, and being connected. So eye gazing is like a really big part of our relationship. And like I said, we never say, okay, let's do eye gazing now. We just, we talk, and then we look into each other's eyes, and then it just happens. And this is also something that I really recommend during sex, looking into the person's eyes, because he's the first man I really look into the eyes really, really long when we have sex. And with others, I often close my eyes. And I think most people would close their eyes or look somewhere else and just have short eye gazes. And we were even talking about like how many couples have like truly seen each other and really looked into their eyes, especially in moments when we're so vulnerable and intimate, like sex. Like looking into the other person's eyes, can you even do it? And I think that's also a really good like starting point because maybe you can't, and that's okay. Maybe you think like, wow, no, that's too intimate. Like I cannot look into the person's eyes during sex for more than 10 seconds. And the question is why, and what would happen if you would do it?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, if you're like in the middle of an argument, then it's like hard to do eye gazing because you like have all these emotions that might help. You're like highly emotional, but you're already calmed down. But I think eye gazing is like a really beautiful practice that's so simple and can always give you feedback on where you are in a relationship, because you might feel more distant or more close, or it will change.
Yeah.
So that's definitely something that's like, I love it.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, same. Yeah, I've done quite a bit in different like group situations and solo situations. And yeah, definitely like it really can split people, because some people do it very naturally and some people are like so resistant to it, and especially during sex. And yeah, like I remember with a couple of partners, but one in particular, really trying to keep the eye contact, because we got really good at both orgasming at the same time. But like, I don't know which one of us noticed, but we'd always close our eyes. And so I don't know if you tried that as well, like kind of mutual orgasming at the same time while doing the eye gazing. That's like a whole nother level. It's
Yes.
yeah, but
Yes.
for me, like it was like because I'll get you to explain that in a second, but I quickly want to touch on something that you said in the other podcast about when you were, that we'll get back to, about self-pleasuring and like kind of feeling like you were like making love with the universe kind of thing. And I think that's the real, like, because the word tantra gets thrown around a lot, but I think to me that's like the true essence of tantra, kind of seeing everything as a reflection of yourself and yourself as a reflection of the universe. But yeah, so to circle back quickly before we go on a tangent, yeah, have you done that sort of practice before as well?
And which practice do you mean that?
Climaxing with the eye gazing and things like that.
Yes, and I can agree that it's like super intense, and yeah, it's like, I think like in the moment of orgasm, you're so vulnerable and you're so like stripped away of so many things, like your ego and your mind, and seeing, like looking into the eyes in that person, like this deep pleasure, it's like, yeah, that's definitely another level, like you said. So yes, if anyone is like watching, try it. I think it can bring a relationship definitely to like a deeper, more intimate level as well. Yeah.
There we go. And let us know. That's the official Daniel Erulian and Silja Janina challenge putting out. So if you do that, let us know how it goes and tag us in your posts about it.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good idea. Like to tell other people and to try it out, and then like having the feedback, because some people might never really have seen the other person as like in that moment. So yeah, I think that would help a lot of relationships know where they are and be more deeply connected, or maybe realize like, wow, I can't even see that person. That person can't see me, which is also okay if that happens, right? So then we have that kind of, so like being open to what happens.
Yeah, and just putting that out there as well, anyone listening, like it's not like we're saying this is the best way to, have an orgasm or have sex. Like this is just, there is no best way. Like it's giving you different ideas to play with, right? It's exploring different ideas and concepts and things like that. And yeah, sometimes it is nice to just let go, close your eyes, and just like completely be in the moment. But yeah, it can be a whole nother level. And I think it can only open up to more intimacy, because what you're saying, a lot of people may not have been witnessed orgasming as well. And I definitely know that some partners didn't want me to look at them when they were orgasming, because they were worried about like their face and their body and their, because it's like, like you said, the most like perfect example of, I'm not trying to be attractive right now. Like my whole body is constricting and like going to oblivion. You don't even know what's happening. And I think, yeah, that is like the ultimate vulnerability, because you're not even aware of what's happening. And if you are trying to be aware of what your body's doing, that you're kind of interrupting the whole process.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I had a woman once asking me, like, she's insecure about her orgasm phase. She thinks like it's weird, or maybe her partner doesn't like it. And I said, like, well, that person is already having sex with you, right? So to them, it is the most turning on thing to see you turn on. And like, people don't think, oh, like what is happening with her face? Like, I think there's even a photographer that has like this series of people coming, and you can see like faces are very different. And yeah, sometimes if you don't know that they're having an orgasm, maybe it looks like they're having some pain, I think
that's really cool.
The pain and the orgasm phase are very similar in some way, like in some people. But yeah, to just trust that that person already wants to be with you. So drop the thoughts that this could not be sexy to the other person.
Yeah, cool. I would love to actually see that and possibly link it. So if you later after the podcast, if you can remember what it's called, that artist, I'd love to link it in the show notes, and I'd love to see it as well. There's so much more in this that like I want to chat about, but I think maybe we'll pin that. I'm gonna write that down. Pin that for our next one, and maybe in the next one, whether it's like a month or two or longer from now, we can delve more into like relationship type of things, because I really want to delve into some of the stuff that you're talking about, self-pleasure. So one of the big things that landed for me was that you were talking about an instance when you were exploring your own self-pleasure practice, where you were trying to be fully in your body, and what that meant for you was not fantasizing and not letting your mind, basically create a scenario or fantasize and be just in your body. And it just struck something with me because I've never actually done that. And that was and I had no idea. And I think that's such an important reason why people should both open up dialogue, but even chat to people like yourself who have explored these, because we're not aware of our own blind spots. And for me, I've since I listened to that, tried that in my own self-pleasure practice, and even in my loverships and things like that. And it's been really, really difficult. And it's something that I've been working with. And I have to be honest, I had so much resistance to it because I realized how much especially my self-pleasure practice, how much that was focused on creating this scenario. Because I've quite like a vivid imagination, and even in my own self-pleasure practice, like porn has never lived up to my own scenarios that I can create. So even though I have explored porn a little bit, I generally don't, because I prefer my own like visualization and scenarios and things like that. So yeah, if you wanted to touch on that, like both on your first experiences with that, and maybe even where you that's evolved and expanded to from there as well, because that was huge for me.
Yeah, I love that you're asking that. So yeah, like to give a context to the listeners, I guess that's what you're referring to, that there was a moment where I self-pleasured, without a fantasy, because up to that point I had always used fantasies, and I also needed certain fantasies. So for example, for me, sex and love was not something that I could bring together. Like sex and love was two different things for me, and I could not be deeply emotional or intimate, vulnerable during sex. It was more, more distant kind of sex. And that was, when I said earlier that I had this like phase where I was alone and I just, explored my own sexuality, my own sexual healing. That was actually the starting point of my sexual healing journey, because that was so mind blowing for me. I did it intuitively. So I wasn't like, I heard about Tantra, but, and, sacred sexuality, but I was not too deep into that. And I self-pleasured. And for the first time, I kind of had to force myself not to use a fantasy, because that's the thing, if you self-pleasure, you masturbate a certain way your whole life, that's going to be the easiest way for your body to orgasm. And trying something different will always come with a challenge and will always be more difficult. But for the first time, I tried to self-pleasure without really fantasizing, or it was not really fantasizing. It was more like connecting to universal love. So kind of like, it was like making love to the universe. And I even made a practice out of it because I teach it to others. And it's basically called Making Love to the Universe practice. So basically letting love enter my body, and like letting my whole being, my energy, making love with love. And that resulted in an orgasm that it catapulted trauma out of my body. It felt like an exorcism. It felt like all this love like entered my body, my whole being, my whole nervous system, and kind of like let everything explode away that wasn't love. And I mean, it was not just this moment and then I was healed, but it was such a big part of my healing, because it felt like this energy that was in my body due to trauma was basically, I think catapulted is the right word. Like, it was thrown out of my body.
Yeah.
And that was the moment where I thought like afterwards, with like, wow, like what was that? And that's crazy that this can happen. And then I went into trying to understand it. And then I, learned more about, for example, that fantasies do keep you a little bit in your mind, right? Because your fantasy is in your mind. And I think fantasies are amazing, and it's not that you should ever drop fantasies because they can be so enriching and beautiful, but also to try not to fantasize and to just really be with the moment and with what you feel. And that is a challenge, because you're basically just with yourself and your pleasure and your sexual energy and being turned on by that instead of being turned on by, for example, someone else or envisioning something. yeah, that's definitely something that I practice also during sex. So, for example, that you're really just with what you feel, that you're like just being connected with the energy that flows between you and your partner. And yeah, I think it's a really powerful practice that it's definitely very challenging. And I think most people have never tried it because, yeah, I think most people, or yeah, I would say most people probably watch porn because that's the easiest way. And I think that's very disconnecting because you're basically watching something else. You're not even letting it come from your own mind, for example, like you said with your fantasies, but you're watching something else. So you're like placing your attention outwards instead of in your body. And that will, yeah, then lead to like a limited experience of your sexuality, I think. Yeah, that's definitely a practice I can recommend trying. And also, it gives so much feedback about, for example, well, how do I feel? Or for example, why do I have certain fantasies and why do I want certain fantasies? Like if the fantasy was gone, what would I feel instead? And that can give so much feedback about ourselves, our sexuality. Yeah. So.
Yeah. I think that even that last line, like if the fantasy was gone, what would you feel? And that was the thing for me. Initially, without the fantasy, it's like, oh, what am I actually feeling like? And I felt like the need to label or even direct it as the pleasure was coming from this fantasy or this idea, and also just how it trickles into other aspects of my life. Like, nothing can ever live up to fantasy, right? There's.
And I think sorry.
I was going to say, was there anything else you want to add on to that before I ask you?
Just that if anyone is listening, I think fantasies are also a very beautiful way of understanding your subconscious, because fantasies are not random. The way your fantasy, like the kind of fantasies you have, can give you a lot of information about your subconscious and your desires, because we, like most people, have maybe certain repeating things that turn them on, right? And it's very specific and very unique. And yeah, it's a good starting point, understanding your own sexuality by understanding your fantasy, and why you're turned on by certain things, for example, and what is the desire underneath. So for example, many women are turned on by like more domination, and the deeper desire underneath that could be to like completely surrender, to feel like, or like to give away the responsibility, the control. And yes, I think fantasies are a beautiful like doorway to understanding ourselves better as well, and like our subconscious. Yeah.
Well, that's a perfect segue into the next part I want to talk about. And that's, and just another disclaimer and reminder that, again, like I feel like people pendulum swing so much. For example, if one side of it is not being in fantasy at all and just being completely in your body and just experiencing through your five senses, and then the opposite of that is really like what we're going to get into next, like completely immersing yourself in your fantasy and seeing it as not something that you need to hide, but you can actually like completely immerse yourself in, and seeing both of those as opportunities to explore, and neither one of them is the right or wrong. But if for example, you might be you listening might be the opposite of me. You might be completely in your body all the time, and this next part might be for you with how to tap into your fantasy, because I'm really interested, and I've heard of like a similar idea before, but you just explained it in a way that I've never heard before, and it really like landed something. You were talking about how a lot of our kind of desires and kinks are linked to what happens to us when we're growing up. So again, like a reconnection with our childlike self, what we were attracted to when we were growing up. Because I've heard of this idea as well that that when you reach puberty and you're starting to develop your sexual self, whatever, like pop culture, whatever first things you're attracted to, that kind of, it's actually a term that I think it's called, see if I get this right, it's erotocrystallization inertia. And it's like kind of like a part of your erotic self crystallizes that it is always going to be like something that you tap back into. So that's a benefit. But to come back to what you were saying, I'd love for you to explain that the little rat experiment that you talked about, and just I think that was just like, yeah, it landed so well for me, and yeah, so you'll explain it so much better. So I'll let you take over, but you know what I'm talking about, hey?
Yes, definitely. So in general, I think it's super interesting to understand, for example, kinks. Or so for anyone listening, I think it's important to understand kink is just something that turns you on, because many people think of kink and then think, oh, it's BDSM. Well, kink can be BDSM, but kink can be something else. It's just something that turns you on, and every person has some kind of like kinks in some way, something that just specifically turns you on. And yeah, like you said, it gets formed in our childhood, like probably our whole personality. I mean, if you think of our relationship patterns, our way of living, our thoughts, our mindset get shaped when we're children or when we're growing up through our parents, through our social environment. And the same goes for our sexuality as well. And there is a study that I love. I can also look for it, so you can maybe link it if people want to go into that. But that there were experiments done with rats that when small, baby rats, were exposed to lemon when they're small, that later in life they would choose other rats that smell like lemons. So when they were baby rats, they associated lemon rats with their growing sexuality, and then that's something they sexually prefer. So if they would go and have the choice between a rat that didn't smell like lemon and one that did smell like lemon, they would always go for the rat that smelled like lemon. So I think that's really cute and interesting.
Little lemon kink rats. I love it.
Yes, exactly. They have a lemon kink, and it's the same with anything else. That if you're a child and this all happens very subtly and very subconsciously. So when you're a child and you associate certain things with pleasure and with joy, it doesn't even have to be sexual pleasure, but with intense joy and ecstasy, because children can feel that, right? They can be so ecstatic about small things. Then those things can turn into kinks, or something that turns you on later in life. For example, when you're in your puberty and you start masturbating and touching yourself, and then you have this fear of, oh, my parents could come in, then that could turn into later on a real kink of associating danger with sex, because in that moment when you're in puberty and you associate the danger of being discovered with your sexuality, then later this can turn into something that you are turned on by dangerous sexual situations, for example.
Mm.
Yeah, it's so interesting to how people might think, or many people might think, that sexuality is so random and fantasies are random. They just happen, but they don't. They always have this how do you say that? This reason underneath. And even for more extreme fetishes, or there's always it can be a deeper trauma, or a deeper reason why people have this certain sexual orientation. And if anyone has a sexual orientation that hurts themselves and that doesn't feel good, because I think as long as it's consensual, it feels good to you, and it enriches your life and your sex life, then I think there's nothing wrong with any fetishes or kinks. But if there's something that kind of hurts you, or that hurts others, or that's not, it just doesn't feel good, then it's important for those people to know that you could actually, I would say, heal that part, so that this kink, this fetish, would not be expressed anymore. So it's not that you're forever doomed to have a certain sexual expression that actually hurts you, because I know there are many people that do have sexual fantasies or sexual desires that simply are not doable in real life, and that would hurt them, or so I think it's really important to understand that it's all linked, and that it's formed through our childhood, oftentimes also through trauma. So
I love that. And I think it just gives so much permission, because everyone thinks that they're the only one, or everyone thinks that they're the weird one, or all that sort of stuff. And I think only good can come of delving into it more and just having a sense of compassion and a sense of humor about it, I think, as well. And I think that's the key for me, you know, like instead of going, oh no, like, you know, no wonder I'm attracted to certain girls because I grew up with like anime and I grew up with like, you know, playing Japanese RPGs and things like that. It's like having a sense of humor about it, noticing my patterns. And I think for me also bringing that in, that it's a source of power if I need it. And so if I'm with a partner that maybe like things are diminishing a little bit, I can find a way to tap into that, whether with role playing or whether it's something like that. But then I can direct that energy back into the relationship kind of thing. So it's like once you're aware of where the power comes from, it doesn't have to move you. You can kind of like kind of channel it a little bit. Do you feel the same? I'm aware that we've got a couple of minutes left before we've got to cut off. So I don't want to keep you, but yeah. So we've just got a couple of minutes left because I know your partner's got to do a call as well in the apartment. So yeah, any last little bits you want to touch on for what we just chatted about?
Yeah, I just that I hope the people listening maybe develop this curiosity about sexuality, like this playful curiosity, because I think sexual healing, yes, it's definitely has very like painful parts and difficult parts and challenging parts, but it can also be like a really fun way of getting to know yourself better. So, for example, I always say like what I actually do is like guide people back to their power and to their truth. And sexuality is just the like, not the tool, but like the doorway. So because sexuality reflects basically everything about yourself. So every sexual challenge, every sexual desire gives you feedback about yourself and your deepest desires, your deepest fears, your deepest traumas. And it's just the most honest mirror, because in our everyday life, we can like shut things down, but our body doesn't lie, right? So we cannot like force ourselves to be turned on by something that we're not. And we can also not force ourselves not to be turned on by something that just turns us on. So it's just like a, you know, this reaction. And to understand that this like understanding and getting to know this feedback, or like getting to know ourselves through our sexuality, can be such a beautiful and deep and rewarding journey. And it can be playful. And yeah, so I guess what I want to say is that when you start looking, understanding, healing your sexuality, you actually look at deeper parts of yourself. So it's like this, also the self-awareness journey, and sexuality is just like a gateway through that.
Definitely.
So,
yeah, I love that. And and you're right. And like a quick example is a partner of mine at one point realized she was attracted to a coworker of hers and was really upset to bring it up and really embarrassed and ashamed and all that. And we ended up having a dialogue about it. And like, I was like, oh, you know, do you want to explore this, etc.? And then she ended up realizing that she, through this idea, that he represented this perfect, like, he was like a singer, musician, all these things that, like, as growing up in pop culture, ticked her boxes. And she was the one that actually discovered this. I didn't even mention this idea. She kind of put it all together herself. But through, you know, and then it fizzled out. It kind of took the charge out. She realized what was driving it. And then the actual connection wasn't really much more than that. So, yeah, there's so much more I wanted to chat to you about. And I will plant one more little seed for our next conversation. One question I did want to ask, that it's too big a question to ask now. But how do we know when we're covering up a trauma? You know, like, because sometimes it's our blind spots. But we will touch on that next time, because we've only got about a minute left. So yeah, where can people find more information about what you do other than the show notes?
I guess my Instagram, and I'm currently, like, I'm launching my new website soon, where I also have a blog where I talk about all these things and talk about like taboo topics and sexuality, or like right text. So so that's definitely something where people can dive into that. Yeah.
Cool. Amazing. Well, I look forward to part 2, and I hope you all do as well. And yeah, thank you, Silja. I really appreciate your time. It was really fun chatting.
Yes. Likewise, I also enjoyed it and looking forward to, part 2 and chatting more. So thank you for your invitation.
Thank you for listening to and being a part of this episode of Make Yoga Magick Again, the House of Mages podcast. I've been your host, Daniel Erulian Cuming. A massive thank you to my guest for this episode, Silja Janina. And if you'd like to connect with us and find out more about what Silja or I do, you can find all of our links in the show notes below. And feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to hear what you thought of this episode. Thanks again, and I'll chat with you again very soon. Until then, make yoga magic again.